Categories of practices. Over the next 3 sections of the course, we're going to cover all 34 of the ITIL 4 practices. These 34 individual practices are divided up into 3 categories: general management practices, service management practices, and technical management practices. This begs the question, though, what exactly is a practice? You may remember from our service value system lesson that there was a portion of the diagram that called out these practices. Well, a practice is a set of organized resources designed for performing work or accomplishing an objective. Each practice is going to support multiple service value chain activities, and it includes resources based on the 4 dimensions of IT service management. So in this section of the course, we're going to focus on the first 14 practices of ITIL 4. These are known as the general management practices. But before we dive into those general management practices, let me cover what you need to know for the exam, because we're going to cover a lot of information during the next 3 sections of the course. First, you need to be able to recall the purpose of 15 of the ITIL practices. I'm not going to list each of those 15 right now, but instead, as we cover each practice in its own video, I'm going to tell you whether you need to recall it for the exam or not. For these 15 practices, though, you need to remember the definition, since these are at the recall level of knowledge for the exam. Just as a reminder, there are 34 practices inside of ITIL 4, and while I'm going to cover each of these at least briefly, this is going to help you get a general awareness of each of the 34 of them. You only really need to know 15 of them for the foundation level of the exam. And of these 15, there are 6 of them that you have to know more in depth. Again, when I cover those specific practices, I'm going to remind you that these are very important, and you're going to have to pay more attention than just knowing the definition. In fact, as we start each of these sections covering the different categories of practices, we're going to first cover the practices that you have to know in depth. Then we're going to cover the practices that you simply need to recall the definition for. And then we're going to finish out each section with the practices that aren't covered by the foundation exam and instead are being covered just for your general awareness. As we go through these 3 sections of the course, we're also going to cover the 7 terms that are under the recall level of knowledge for the exam, and we're going to do this throughout our discussion of these practices. These are the IT asset, event, configuration item, change, incident, problem, and known error. When we get to them in the lessons, I'm going to remind you again that these are the terms that you have to memorize the definitions for. So, with all of that said, let's dive into the general management practices.